So you are here to learn about breaking the bonds of toxic narcissism. And, I think there are a lot of different names for what we go through, but those of us who have experienced it, we often can recount the tale, no matter who we are, without knowing one another at all in the same way. So hopefully you will learn a little bit more about this syndrome and how we recover from it and why it may be done in a different way than what other people have thought. I'm going to share my screen just to give you some words instead of just looking at me the whole time. I'll be popping in and out, but so that you can have just more than one source of information. Most of you, I would say, may not know me. So I am going to share a little bit about myself, and I may whoop through all this. I don't want to bore you, but I want to share about how I became an expert in all of this. And it wasn't that I got my BA at UCSD. It wasn't that I got my MA and PhD at Northwestern. It wasn't even when I certified in mind-body medicine at Harvard Medical School. It wasn't in any of the years I spent as a forensic psychologist. It wasn't even when I was doing debriefing for protective services. It wasn't during any of that I became an expert in what we're talking about today. I think where it really began was through my own experience. So if you know the story, I'll try to move through it, but if you don't, I'll tell you a little bit about what my experience has been since I landed here on this planet. I always knew I was different. And I think that kids were both drawn to me, but also a little put off by me. So they set me apart. And by being more isolated, perpetrators could see me a little bit easier, I think. And unfortunately, I experienced quite a bit of assault. I learned to dissociate or leave my body and to allow my mind and my soul to be safe while I was being harmed. But eventually that had some downsides, because if you get really good out of sort of flipping in and out of your body, sometimes you just forget to go back in and to ground and to be present with others. At 15, I was groomed by a local cartel, and eventually I was trafficked by that cartel. I developed something called Stockholm Syndrome as a coping mechanism because it wasn't safe for me to be present. It wasn't safe for me to be in those circumstances every day. And so I learned to adapt to the truth of my perpetrators. I learned to hide the self I'd always known. And when I was eventually released, I ran and I ran and I ran, and I wanted safety. I wanted protection. And who did I find? A man. And unfortunately, I eventually learned that that man was a sociopath, unfortunately. I was initially charmed by him. Sociopaths have this great potential for charming their victims, being all that, being exactly what you're looking for. And it really wasn't until later on, actually probably until I married him, that I began to realize there was something out of whack. It wasn't just that it was difficult to be married or that we had to learn, how to interact with one another. I realized it was more to it than that. And during graduate school, I ended up returning to California before him. And he was saying he was going to, get the lease solved and all of that good stuff. And unfortunately, I learned later that he had another family. He had another wife. And, not a lot of soul, but a lot going on. And I was hoping that by moving to California, I would have more support. Somehow I could make the marriage work. But he was not invested in that. And so things didn't change. And 2 years after I returned to California, he threw me out of a moving car going 45 miles an hour. That was a wake-up call. And I wish I could say that got me out that day, but it wasn't even that day. It was shortly thereafter when I learned, after 2 years of infertility testing, that I could never become pregnant with my partner. And when I delivered the news, he pulled out a couple of bags of luggage and off he went. I was initially, overwhelmed and so beside myself. But following the divorce, I took a position in the South that allowed me to ground back in myself again, and I regained my confidence. I was a big fish in a little pond, and I got to do lots and lots of things that helped me to feel kind of a little bit of that energy again. And when I was riding that wave, I met a man. And eventually I married this charming older man who turned out to be a narcissist. And after having 2 children in 2 years, I realized that I had again gotten into an unhealthy relationship. I was mortified. I was confused. I sought help, but I really didn't know what else to do. And, the suggestion I was given was get out. So I did. I closed my big integrative medical center. I opened a small practice, and I just thought to myself, what can I do to just stay connected to me? And I'd always had some intuition, and I thought, maybe I'll lean into that. So I started training in integrative medicine, and I loved it, but I still wasn't ready to be out. I still wasn't comfortable sharing that with other people because I'd already chosen 2 really unhealthy men. What was wrong with me? It seemed like the question I was constantly asking myself. So I focused on my children and my career, and while minding my own business, I met a charming man at a ball. Yes, across a crowded room. And he was brilliant and sexy, and he had a career just like my dad's in finance. And it wasn't until much later that I realized he had borderline personality disorder. The choice was an improvement, sociopath, narcissist, borderline. But really, once again, my Stockholm Syndrome started to take me down that rabbit hole. I had 3 children in 2 years to bring the total to 5 kids. My career and reputation were growing, but I was slowly losing myself. At one point in my postpartum phase with my last set of twins, I even thought of killing myself to get away from him. I was a bright, highly educated, well-trained, well-respected clinician in relationship with a man who was sucking the life out of me. And that special light that I came into this world with was just dimming day by day. Something really had to give. And so I invested in a ton of courses, a ton of experientials, a ton of retreats. And it wasn't until I started working with a shaman in Mexico that things began to make better sense. I realized I had Stockholm Syndrome again. I had to lay it to rest. Otherwise, I was just going to lose myself altogether. And by the end of the marriage, I developed multiple myeloma. And I knew that if I did not get to the bottom of this and get free of all this, I knew I'd die. I mean, it is a terminal illness, but I knew that I wouldn't even be able to survive the treatment. So I left again. 5 kids, 4 cats, a dog. Thank God, no birds or, any other animals, but everybody needed me. And I didn't even know if I could do it. But as soon as I cleared him out of my home and out of my heart and energy field, I signed my first big contract. And I leaned into that growth and that evolution and that transformation. So you might just be asking, like, well, is the answer just to leave? Well, no, of course not. Have you ever heard that saying, you can take the country out of the girl, but you can take the girl out of the country, but not the country out of the girl. Okay, so the same is true. Like when you have been in a relationship, either personal or professional, with a soul-sucking narcissist, or any other kind of, soul sucker, the impacts are far reaching. They go with you. You can move them out of your field. You can move out of the house. You can move out of the job. But the reality is they impact your being and they impact the way you approach your own life. So leaving is a great start if you can do that safely, but you really have to dive deeper than that. The next step is really just to understand this process and engage in ending the cycle once and for all. Why me? It's the question I hear from most women who've been in relationships with soul suckers. Why is it that the most powerful, gifted, intuitive, and creative women leaders somehow manage to end up in relationships with controlling narcissists who suck their souls dry? Really, I mean, of all the people in the world, these are women. I was one of those women that I thought, okay, this should not be happening to me. I should know better. I should be able to manage this. Even years after healing from the breakup, we women live with what feels like a curse and a glass ceiling that could limit your visibility, wealth, confidence at work, and certainly the way you think about attracting another partner. So I know why this happens to the strongest women, and it's a reason that nobody else is talking about. It's not your fault. Your chooser is not broken. You didn't choose unhealthy relationships on purpose. You're special. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Not when your friends are poking at you and saying, you're special. I mean, you're special. It's likely that you've been called an old soul most of your life. And, maybe you noticed it. I can tell you when I was 4, I was crystal clear that there was something really different about you. And if we get on a discovery call, ask me and I'll tell you this story. I didn't know what old soul meant then, but if I had, I would have known it. I would have absolutely known I was an old soul. But what I did know is that people referred to me that way throughout my life. They still do. Sometimes you just feel like you're different than the rest. Sometimes people refer to you that way. Some people are just attracted to your energy and they notice that you just seem to emanate this light. Some people see the light and they'll project onto you that you're sexy or arrogant or a know-it-all or too good for other people, even though you were just an open, loving person. I remember my first daughter-in-law calling me arrogant. And we didn't have a lot of interactions. And I was always very loving to the children, very giving, always trying to make sure they had everything they needed. And yet I heard this word and I remember thinking, what in the world is she talking about? I later came to realize she just could not deal with that energy that was vibing off of me. So I look at old souls as having 5 types. You may notice yourself in here, or this may all be new to you. So the first type I talk about is the harmonizer. And some people who are kind of really into this would call that a Venusian. And the harmonizers are here to connect the dots between people. They ease friction. They ensure that everyone has what they need. Everyone's getting along. And this can be really a source of frustration for an old soul when people are not getting along and they do everything they can to make sure people are getting along, and they can make themselves sick because their soul is driving them forward to try to make it work between people. The next one is the elemental, and sometimes we call these people fairies. They tend to relate better to animals, to the earth, sometimes to plants, and they're generally more of a quiet happy. They may even be very introverted, and their life's work may include something on sustainability because they're very devoted to the earth. The next type is the Magdalene, and The Magdalens are here to uplift through their sensual energy. They're likely spending time and effort helping other women embrace and unleash their own sensual energy. And they can certainly be sort of misread as sexual. So when they are attached by a soul-sucking narcissist, that person may want to drive them into a constant sexuality, may overvalue their sexual self rather than their sensual self. And that can really be a tough road, because the Magdalene is that it's a pure sensuality. It's not designed to just be sexual. The next old soul type would be the angel. And the angel is a light being that is hugely sensitive to all forms of energy, hugely sensitive. They may radiate a beautiful, kind of sexy way, but they're often clueless about how other people perceive them. They may have even a childlike innocence, no matter what they've been through. They could go through horrific trauma, and they'd still carry more of a kind of an innocent energy around them. And they may be so sensitive that they have to be careful about things like exposure to light and sound, smells, tastes. So they have to really protect their energy field at all times. And then the last soul types would be the warrior. Warriors are here to ensure that justice is served and that people who need protection get it. Their energy can be incredibly intense, but not in an unattractive way. These old souls just mean business. So don't stand in their way. When they are devoted to getting something done, you can really feel it. So old souls come into the world like everyone else, mind, body, soul. But they also come in with something we call the essence. And that's an extra slice of light, an extra slice of God or oneness, or whatever it is that you see as a higher power. It's palpable and even visible to some people. Even if you never noticed it, others have. I have a colleague that I work with, and she is definitely an angel. And it doesn't matter what size or shape or how she's feeling. If somebody photographs her, she is one of the most photogenic people I've ever seen. And that's what we see. Our eyes see beauty. And yet that person, even as an old soul, might not see that on their own. So sociopaths, narcissists, and those with borderline personality, they don't have healthy senses of self. So if you could think about their insides as being hollow, they don't fare well alone. They don't do well without having some other food source or power source. And they need to do that externally because they don't have a system that will do that for us. We sustain ourselves often by bringing in that divine energy constantly. Those folks don't do it that way. They don't even have the sense of self to make that happen. So, as an old soul, you're a terrific food source for a soul sucker. And as horrifying as that may sound, it's our reality. We are supremely visible to soul suckers, and we're their optimal targets. But that doesn't have to be, a death sentence, okay? There's something called the accidental magnet, right? Nobody would intentionally choose to get into a violent relationship or an unhealthy relationship. Nobody would choose to take a job if they knew the manager was a soul sucker, right? We don't do that. We powerful women, we know better than that. But the soul sucker's life depends on attracting a food source, a power source, a source of energy. And the soul sucker is usually brilliant, actually, and has developed all of the tools to attract you and to distract you from his or her goal. And I am globally using the word his, but it could easily be her or hers or theirs. So in addition to his stealth mode, you're invested in him too. Okay, don't just hang up. Don't just, hit delete. Don't just leave the meeting. As an old soul woman, you want to help and uplift others, right? You want to know that you're making a difference in the world. Why would we come down here with this extra slice of light if we couldn't do something with it? We know we're here to do something. And you may meet him or her and want to be that special person in his or her life. Let's face it, being an old soul can also be lonely. We are different. We're often misunderstood. We are drawn to somebody who wants to receive us, love us, hold us, protect us. I mean, think about what I ran to. I ran to somebody to protect me, and he could see me from a mile away. I had no idea that those were just tools in his toolkit. And most of us don't realize what happened until the hook's in, and hooked in deep. So how do we break the cycle? So this first step one, is just like getting free of an addiction, right? We've got to recognize that there's a problem. If you've logged in today, you have probably realized that there's a problem. And while you may not have realized it before, or if you're somebody that really never realized it, your friends and family and coworkers, they may have realized it. So they may even have staged an intervention and encouraged you to exit. The second step is that you've got to remember, and I'll say that as remember. You didn't come in with Stockholm Syndrome. If you developed it while engaged with the soul sucker, it kind of happens there, but most people don't come into the world with that. You came in as a tremendous light being. You came in with all the potential in the world. It's time to dig out your core, and it's time to embrace your queen. In step 3, you've got to break the chains. It's not just getting out of the job or the house or the relationship. It's one thing to remember who you were, but you've really got to embrace that wholeheartedly. And then you've got to break the cycle once and for all. This step requires that you uncover the hooks that held you in place with the soul sucker. So often those hooks are hidden in early trauma, in early unhealthy family dynamics, or even in a desperate desire just to be liked or for everybody to get what they deserve. We often just don't realize that people are getting hurt during the process. Once those hooks are uncovered, we use a series of energetic and cognitive affirmations that allow those cords to be cut once and for all. In step 4, you've got to reactivate that essence. It's like that extra infusion of energy, but it can be experienced like a blessing, but also a curse. It's a blessing because it allows you intuition and unique sensitivities and awarenesses maybe that other people don't have, but it can be feeling like a curse because it's rarely understood. It can feel intimidating to other people, and it can leave you feeling lonely and vulnerable to those who see that essence as useful. So by reactivating this part of you that's connected to the divine, you attune to a far stronger, more confident, more powerful energy. And when you're fully activated, you can no longer lose yourself. It's as if that tiny pilot light has the oxygen to be a nice big flame. And once that flame is going, you no longer mistake users for true friends or lovers. I often tell people this is a little bit like putting on your X-ray vision or X-ray goggles, that when that pilot light becomes a flame again, when that essence is really activated, we put on those X-ray vision goggles and we can easily see who the soul suckers are and who they are not. And we begin to choose only those who are not soul suckers. So these are the promises we make to you in this work. If you could activate this special spiritual gift that you've been lugging around and let it carry you now, how would that feel to you? Would it feel lighter, brighter, easier. If you could fall in love with yourself and your body more than ever, what would that be like? For those of us who struggled with weight to keep it on or to keep it off or whatever, how would it feel to be able to really just embrace your whole self? We promise that you're going to connect with a clan of wise women who celebrate you instead of compete with you. We help unveil your deepest gifts to you and to the world. What would it be like to be rewarded, adored, and respected for your unique gifts rather than shunned or isolated or seen as arrogant? We give you an opportunity to heal the hidden wounds you didn't even realize you'd been carrying. And you can now magnetize a partner who loves to support and adore you for all of that you are. Not somebody who's just going to feed on you. And you can get the high level clearing and support from a mentor who can meet you where you are, who can meet you with that extra energy. And for those of you who have noticed the impact on your career, you're going to blow past that glass ceiling with your income that you've probably had since you got into the relationship with the soul sucker. And it's time to soar now that you've gotten free. So the options we have for stage 1, women who are ready to remember who they are and they've left the soul sucker behind. We have both individual and group interventions as options. In stage 2, we host retreats and we call them Embracing Your Queen. And we do weekend retreats. We've got one coming up in December 9th through 11th in Beach Haven, New Jersey. And that is an opportunity to remember who you are, to remember what it feels like to be adored by supportive women, for people who can really just enjoy you rather than, again, feed off you. In stage 3, it's breakthrough work time. This is the space where we deep dive, and it's powerful when an old soul woman reaches this stage to either do that individually or with the support of others. So we do the individual coaching and counseling, but we also have masterminds for our wise women who would rather do that with the support of other women. In stage 4, we do activation ceremonies and we design them for each woman individually. And I love to do these ceremonies in person, but if we have to do them remotely, we will. The activation ceremonies, they have the sole goal of tuning you up to that vibration you came in with. It's just like a tuning fork. We make sure that your essence, your soul is exactly in line with whoever, whatever you envision as your God, universe, spirit, higher power, oneness, whatever you attune to. We make sure that is vibrating at the same line, being on the same page. And in stage 5, when you've activated your essence, you'll be invited into the Wise Women circles so that you can access support of other women in this community who have also activated their essences. And you'll also have online resources associated with the women's circle. And if your evolution and transformation take you to the highest level, if that essence drives you to embrace and uplift really world vision, you will be ordained into the Circle of Essentials. And that is a group of women who intend to change the world and have been brought here for that purpose. So if this information has resonated for you, it's time to get going. We are ready to make sure that you have what you need and so that you can do everything that you've been meaning to do by being here on this planet. You are welcome to reach out to me. You can find us on sagebreslin.com and you can reach out and let us know how we can support you. Thank you so much for being with us today, and I look forward to seeing or hearing from you in the very near future.